Hi folks, this is Karim Rao from IT Visualizer channel. Today we will continue our lab, the transformers, sorry. This is the 32 video, or the 32 video. We were discussing the previous video on how to secure and backup our Active Directory domain structure. We were working on a documentation submitted by a user called Ka. This documentation is called Active Directory Security Assessment. It contains a lot of and very useful best practice. I thank you, Ka, again for this magnificent PDF. I encourage you all to implement all of the measures and best practices in it. And in the previous year we begin working with this PDF, or this best practice for security and backup your Active Directory admin structure. And actually also the previous video we have installed a backup solution called BackupExec Veritas. This Veritas 20.6, this backup solution will be used to backup our users, shares, directories, and backup also the domain controllers, system state, and a lot of things. We will use this BackupExec 20.6 software solution to backup all of our Active Directory domain structure. So without further hesitation, let's begin our video. Before going to complete our working with our Active Directory Security Assessment PDF, I need to just discuss a couple of points with you all. When working in the IT field, you need to concentrate, or you need to have 2 points in mind. These points should be your focus and be your ultimate goal to achieve. Okay, you have to have 2 points to concentrate on. So I am just repeating myself. You need to concentrate on having a backup plan and have a security plan. Okay, for having a backup plan, okay, let's have this diagram. For having a backup plan, you need to concentrate on 2 things when having a backup plan. To have a backup plan, you have to have a solution to backup your users' data, shares, and all of this, and then you need to backup your services to be online and to be available for 24/7, which means that you need to have all your services working without any stop or any interruption. Okay, so in all of my labs I just concentrate on making my lab very close to the production or to the real working or real enterprise environments. Okay, so in the beginning of the lab we can see that if you want to return first to my earlier videos, on my first video when creating the transformers domain, first of all I have made a virtual machine and then put a domain controller, or promote it to a domain controller. And when working with this domain controller, I have put 2 network cards and make a team between them. Why is this? Because when one network card is off or it's not working, the network connection to your domain controller will not be down, then the other network card will be working. So this is the first backup plan for your network services. Okay, so this is the service. You have to have a backup plan for your network service to be working 24/7. So this is the first thing to do when you are creating a domain controller. Make sure that you have 2 network cards and make a team. So if one of these network cards fails, you can continue working, or the users can connect to your domain controller with the other network card. So this is the backup plan. This is number 1. And then when we install the Windows Server Data Center 2019, I have added 2 hard disks and made a mirror solution between them, or make it RAID 1. Simply RAID 1 means that you have a hard disk. For example, if you want to save a file, you have 2 hard disks. For example, let's have this. Okay, I can just type it for you. Okay, here is a hard disk, and there is another hard disk. Sorry, and let's see, this is hard disk. When you have a file you want to save, okay, you first save the first part of the file on the first hard disk and then the second part of the file in the second hard disk. Okay, so this is called mirroring. Okay, sorry, I'm actually awfully sorry, please guys, forget this. When you want to save a file, what you do that you first save the file on the first hard disk and then save it again on the second hard disk. Okay, so this is called the mirror solution. Okay, we have installed the operating system Windows Server 2019 on two hard disks working as a mirror solution. Why is this? Because if for any reason one of these hard disks fails, you can continue working with your Windows Server 2019 system without any problems. For example, if the hard disk fails or something, okay, you can work with the other hard disk without a problem. So we have installed our operating system on two hard disks acting as a mirror solution. As I said before, mirror is simply when you try, for example, to save a file to the computer, the computer will save the file here first on the first hard disk and then it will save it again on a second hard disk. Okay, so you have typical or identical copy of all what you have on two hard disks. So this is a backup plan for your operating system. We have installed the operating system for the domain controller on two hard disks acting as a mirror. So this is your second backup plan. The backup plan we have done for the network. As I said, we have network team, and the second backup plan for your system, we have a mirror system. Okay, and then it's the C drive that contains the system, and then we have another solution. We have added 4 hard disks to this domain controller and make it as RAID 10. Simply what RAID 10s mean that, for example, first of all, these 4 hard disks will act as one hard disk. For example, if one of these hard disks failed, for example hard disk 4 has failed, you will not lose the data. You will just take off this failing hard disk and add a new one, and then the other 3 hard disks will work to restore the data that was corrupted on the 4th hard disk and add it to the new one that you add. Okay, so this is called RAID 10. So then we have a backup plan. This will contain our server data, maybe this, and we call it a D drive. The D drive, this for example maybe contain your user share files, your data files, your SQL, maybe if you have a SQL. So here we have make a backup plan for our data, okay, by having 4 hard disks acting as RAID 10. And as I said, RAID 10 have a very huge function that if one hard disk fail of the 4, you can complete working. You will not use your data. You will just take off the corrupted hard disk and add a new one, and the other 3 hard disks will combine or will work together to restore the corrupted data on the 4th hard disk. So this is another backup plan. So we have backup plan on our network with having 2 network cards. We have a backup plan on our operating system. We have 2 hard disks acting as mirror. This is for the operating system, and we have a backup plan for our data by working with 4 hard disks acting as RAID 10. So, and again, when we set up this domain controller, we have a lot of services working on it. We have a DHCP, we have a DNS, we have WINS. Okay, so to make a backup plan for our services, this is services. Okay, we have make backup plan for the network, for the operating system, for the data, but we need to have a backup plan for the services. Okay, so we will create another domain controller and have another DHCP. It will be a failover DHCP, which means that we have 2 DHCPs. Okay, they will work together to issue IP addresses to the workstations by 50% to 50%. For example, this first domain controller will issue 50% of the IP pool to the workstation, and the other DHCP will work with the remaining 50% of the IP addresses to issue it to the remaining workstations. Okay, so here we have 2 DHCPs and we have 2 DNS. Okay, because it's the second domain controller. So we have DHCP, we will install a second DHCP to be a failover. So we have 2 DHCPs, and the first domain controller acts as a DNS, and also the second domain controller acts as a DNS. It will be a copy of this DNS, and then we will have a file server on it. File server will contains all our user shares and blah blah blah, and we will make it we'll make a backup plan with the Veritas backup to take the user shares on a tape or on a DVD or on an external hard disk, and then we have wins here, another wins. This will be a copy of the first wins on the domain controller. So here we have a complete backup of the whole server with another server. We have two servers identical from each other. They have the same services running. Okay, they have also, as I said before, here the second domain controller will also have two network cards acting as a team, and also will have two hard disks as a mirror also for its operating system, and also it will have RAID 10 for its data. So this is an identical server from the first domain controller. So if, for example, the whole server is down, then we have your second domain controller. It will have all of the services running and have all of the precautions. We will have a network teaming, we will have mirror for backup the operating system, to have a backup plan for the operating system. Also we'll have RAID 10 to backup a backup plan for our data, the SQL and the user shares and blah blah blah. So here you have to make sure when you are working in an IT structure environment or we are working in a production environment to have a backup plan for your data and for your services. And then the second thing, to have a security plan to secure your network as mostly as you can. For doing this, you need to make sure that all of your systems are up to date. We all know that there is bugs and problems or with let's say bugs and security issues with Microsoft Windows, and every now and then the Microsoft team releases an update or something to fix the security bugs and issues in its operating system. So you need to make sure that all of your Windows, the Windows Server or Windows 10 or Windows workstations, to have their systems up to date. This will be done through the WSOS. With this, we will see this in an upcoming video. Okay, and then you may have to make a security policy, which means you have to implement a strong security policy, which means that you need to make sure that for example, your user passwords is very complex. You need, for example, to make your Active Directory user passwords to be a complex password, to be more than 7 characters. This is a recommendation of Microsoft, to make it a combination of letters and numbers and capital letters and small letters and containing special characters, and also the expiry date for the password to be 90 days. This is a recommendation of Microsoft. You need to have a password more than 7 characters, to have an expiry date for 9 days, and also, for example, to have a lockout. For example, if the user failed or he have typed the password more than once, for example, if he typed the password incorrect for 4 times, then his account should be locked. Okay, this is all recommendations of Microsoft. Microsoft has a very good documentation called Security Baseline. This contains a lot of best practice security policies and security setting to secure your Active Directory environment, and we will work with our documentation that our user Hiyu Ka, and again I thank him a lot for this very useful documentation. We will work in this lab or continue using in this lab the security ADSA, Active Directory Security Assessment documentation with Hiyu Ka. Okay, all of this concept I have already forget to discuss it in my previous video, so this you have to take in consideration when working as an IT, to have these 2 points on your daily operation and your focus, to have focus on your backup plan and your security plan. Okay, and these two, if any IT failed to cope with them or fail to implement them successfully, this could fire you up. Okay, when we were working in our production environment, they say to us that we are working in Starwood and Marriott. They said 2 things that you can make you make us fired is to fail in one of these 2 points: fail in our backup plan, or fail in, to have a backup plan, or fail to secure our network or secure our Active Directory. Securing our network not mean, or it's not only securing the Active Directory, but to secure your network as a whole. Okay, to secure your switches, secure your firewall, secure your workstations. There is a lot of best practices and a lot of things and a lot of policies implemented by a lot of chains around the world. For example, in Marriott there is a standard, or is there a security policy or a security standard to be implemented. For example, in Hyatt there is another security policy or standard. For example, on Hilton maybe it contains also another security standard, but all of them share common policies, okay, to be implemented, and of course every one of them have its special security policies to secure its network. So if you are working or you want to be a professional IT, or to have your environment secure and to work as an IT professional guy, you need to have your to focus on the backup plan and the security plan. So let's begin our video now. We will continue working with the with HEU documentation. So here we will open the PDF. We have stopped in the last video on page 34. This is some security policy setting. We will refer to it later, or we will discuss it later. Here I'm just revising the setting to see or to remember in what page I have already stopped. As I said before, I have stopped the last video on page 34. We will work with these two software for ACL, okay, but not now. We will go to another point. I will discuss it later, okay, but I am just taking see what of these practices are easy to implement first, and then the things that need additional setup or additional understanding, I leave it to the end. So now here, for example, just a minute, no, this not, we will not discuss it. I will discuss this also in the end. Okay, just a minute, still I am just okay, here we go. This is the first thing that we will do in this documentation. We will enable an option called Active Directory Recycle Bin. Okay, the Active Directory Recycle Bin, this is like the recycle bin of the Windows. If, for example, you have deleted a user, Active Directory user, or have you deleted an organizational unit, or have you deleted a security group, you can retrieve it or restore it from the Active Directory Recycle Bin. The same that when you are working with Windows, for example, if you have deleted the file or folder, then you can go to the recycle bin and restore it again. Okay, so this feature is not enabled by default. We need to go to the PowerShell and run it as administrator and type the following command to enable the recycle bin feature. Okay, so let's see how we can do it. Here we will start our two domain controllers. You will first open the VM Workstation Pro, and then we power on the first domain controller and then the second domain controller. Here we go. This is the first domain controller. So I think now we can just pass it. Okay, now yes. So now we have already our first domain controller powered on and it's up and running. Then we will power on the second domain controller, which also this is also our file server. Then we will log into the first domain controller. Okay. Actually, you can run this command or this PowerShell command to enable the Active Directory recycle bin from any one of them, or from either of them. You can run it on the first domain controller or the second domain controller. Okay, it will do the trick. Okay, because they are two domain controllers in the same domain. Okay, and they sync their Active Directory setting and configuration are synced between them. Okay, because they are a replica or they are identical servers. Okay, from the configuration side and from the hardware side. Okay, so here we will log in to the second domain controller. He says that my password is expired. I need to change it. As I said before, is best practice, our best practice from Microsoft to have the password expire date or the password age to be 90 days. Okay, this is the maximum password age. Maximum password age means that password expire. In other terms, it need to be 90 days. There is something called password minimum age, which means that the time, the least amount of time that you need before changing it to another. For example, if you have made a password, okay, and then you wanted to change it to another thing. Okay, so there is a minimum. You can, for example, you can't change your current password to another password until a certain duration. For example, also the recommendation from Microsoft to have the minimum password age to be for 2 days. For example, as I said before, if you have already set a password and then you have, for example, seen that this password is weak or you need to change it to another thing, you will not be able to change your password until 2 days have passed. Okay, so this is the password maximum password age, and then this is the maximum password age, which is the password expire. Its recommendation to be 90 days, and then the password minimum age to be 2 days. This is the time that you need before changing your password to another password. Okay, so here now we have already opened our logged into our first domain controller. Sorry, here I am just as I said before in the previous video, there is a lot of services when I start my domain controller, which contains the second domain controller contains the BackupExec 20.6 software. All of the services of the BackupExec don't start automatically, so I need to start them by myself so I can be able to use the BackupExec 20.6 software. For example, here we can see that most of the services doesn't work because there is a trick. As I said before in my previous video, you need to put the password for the username that is responsible for running all of the BackupExec services. As I said before, when set up the BackupExec 20.6, you need to have or to create an Active Directory account dedicated to run the BackupExec services, and also to have most or to have a lot of privileges, so you can, for the BackupExec, to use this username to access the servers to make backup from it. For example, if you need to backup for example here some files on this server, you need to have a Active Directory user account and tell the BackupExec software to use it to access this server and backup it up. And this username should have full rights or full access to this server. And what is more, what is the user that has more Active Directory rights than the admin or the domain admin? You can put it in the domain admin group, but as I said before, I prefer that you make a group. For example, I have a group called tr_it, and this group is a member of all of the most groups, built-in groups in the Active Directory that have a lot of rights. For example, tr_IT is a group or is a member, a group member of domain admins, enterprise admins, schema admins. So here, this username, as I said before, the BackupExec use to start all of its services and to backup all of the other services or backup the remote services. Here is a problem that you need to go to one of the services, okay, and put the password of this username again and tell him to apply OK. So for the services, the BackupExec to start, okay. This is not normal because this is a virtual environment, but in production you will not see this error. Every time I restart the server, I need to go to one of the BackupExec services and type the password for the username that the BackupExec use to start its services, to put it again, the password again for this account, and tell him apply and OK. So now we have already typed the password again, and then we can see that we can start the service of the BackupExec normally. We should note here that all of the BackupExec services that contains the automatic startup type need to be started. For example, this should be working and this should be working. You leave the manual one, don't start it. This also should be working, and this also should be working, and this also should be working, okay. All of these services that are automatic, you should make sure that they are running. If you have any problems with the BackupExec 20.6 software, you need to go to the services, okay, and see if all of the BackupExec services are running, okay, the automatic one in specific. So now it will take a little bit of time for the services. Sorry, it's paused. So if you are troubleshooting any problem with the BackupExec 20.6 software, you need to make sure, or the first step to do when troubleshooting a problem with the BackupExec, you need to go to the services and see if the services that the software or BackupExec 20.6 software uses to work with, you need to make sure that it is up and running, because if any one of these services is not running, you will have problems with the BackupExec 20.6 software. I think I said this in my previous video, okay, but this is to confirm what I said before. You need to make sure when working with the BackupExec 20.6 software that all of the services that is needed for this software to work, you have to make sure that they all are up and running, okay. All of the automatic start type option or the start type service, you need to make sure that all what contains the word automatic, you need to make sure that they are running, and you need to make sure that the service contains BackupExec. To make sure this is all of the services from here to here, all of these are the BackupExec services, okay. You need to make sure that all of them are working except for the manual one, okay, and for the disabled one, okay. You need to make sure of this. So now let's go to the first thing to do is to enable the Active Directory Recycle Bin option. Here also this is another service I have already, in my previous videos, I have already installed the Active Directory Right Management Service. If you want to know more, please refer to my previous videos. This Active Directory Right Management Service has a database that it works with, or it puts its data on it. So this is the type of database. It's Windows internal database, and also this is a problem when I am working in a virtual environment. The Windows internal database doesn't start automatically, so I need to start it up so I can be able to use the Active Directory Right Management Service. So this is also another thing to note when you are working in a in a virtual environment, and you intend, for example, to set up Active Directory Right Management Service. You need to make sure that your Windows internal database service is running to troubleshoot if there is a problem with the Active Directory Right Management Service. So here now we will take the command, or the PowerShell command. We just need to edit this line because we need it to reflect our Active Directory domain, because here it's, for example, this command, it's for a domain called corp.contoso.com. This is an Microsoft company, so I needed to reflect my Active Directory domain, which is transformers.local. So you will change the target, -target, from corp.contoso.com to transformers.local. okay. So now we can take the whole line. Okay, we have already changed the command line, okay, or the PowerShell command to reflect our Active Directory domain. Then we will go to the PowerShell and run it as administrator. We'll right click, okay, the PowerShell, and then run as administrator. Okay, I prefer to be on the C drive, okay, just to make sure that it will work correctly. Then we will paste our command and then press enter. It will get a notification saying that, warning, it will be enabled. Just a minute here. Here it will tell you that it will enable the recycle bin feature, or CN partitions, CN configuration, your domain. Okay, here it contains our domain. Okay, it means that it will enable the recycle bin feature on the Active Directory. I think the Active Directory here has a partition like the Windows, if we can say. So it will enable this feature on this destination. Okay, so it's saying to you that it's an irreversible action, which means that you can't, after enabling the recycle bin feature, you can't disable it. Okay, so he's telling you that before enabling this. Okay, and he will give you to perform this action, to tell him yes or yes to all. We will tell him A, which is yes to all. Okay, so now we have enabled the recycle bin. There is another command, okay, which is get AD optional feature. Here, from this command, we will make sure that the recycle bin feature is enabled. We have to type this is to make sure that we have already the recycle bin feature is up and running. Here we have a small note. You can get a little bit further. Here we can see that it's telling you that the recycle bin feature is enabled here. This should contain between brackets, you have to have the destination or the location that this recycle bin feature is enabled on. As I said before, it should contain CN partitions, CN configuration, DC transformers, DC local. So we need to have this appearing in the enable scope section. but for some reason it didn't appear. Okay, so it took me a little bit of time until I realized that I needed to make it on the first domain controller. Okay, because when I did it on the first domain controller, I can see that the recycle bin feature is there, and he's telling me the scope or the location that this recycle bin feature is enabled on. But this make me suspect that the recycle bin feature is not enabled yet. Okay, here we can see that it contains the location that this recycle bin feature is enabled on. As you can see that the output in my Active Directory, or sorry, the output in the PowerShell doesn't contain this. Okay, so I'm trying, or I suspect that I should, or maybe I need to enable the recycle bin again to make sure that the enable scope option contains the destination, that the destination that the Active Directory recycle bin is enabled on. Okay, we will see that in a moment, that I have figured out that I need to make it on my first domain controller. Okay, not my second domain controller. Okay, even though that are a replica, but it seems that the first domain controllers have the FSRM role. If someone knows this this term or this expression. Okay, sorry, not FSRM, this is another thing. Okay, anyway, you need to make it on the first domain controller. Okay, not the second domain controller. If you have a production environment and you have two domain controllers, you need to make it, or to enable the recycle bin feature on the first domain controller. Also, I thought maybe that I should be in under Windows C System 32. Maybe if I am not on this destination, maybe this is the problem. If I were on this destination, maybe the output will be different. I can see, for example, that the enable scope, maybe it will appear if I am on C Windows System 32, not on the C. Okay, here I'm trying to enable the feature again. He's saying no, it's already enabled. Okay, I thought it was a problem with the, I need to enable the feature again, but still I can't see any anything in the enable scope still. So I figured out maybe I need to make it on the first domain controller. So here also will be on the C drive, and here I am, just for a precaution, I will be on C Windows System 32 folder, just to make sure that the command will appear finally, or I can execute the command successfully. Here I am trying to enable again the recycle bin feature. He will say to me, okay, still the same warning that we have before. No, he's saying that it is already enabled. So now I am trying to use the second line of command, or the second command line, to see if the output will be different. Here we can see here, okay, we can see here that this appeared. Here the enable scope now contains where my recycle bin my recycle bin feature is enabled. Where is the location that this recycle bin feature is enabled on? Just a minute, because my laptop power is down. Just a minute, here you go. So now we can see that here the enable scope contains the location of the recycle bin feature enabled on. Okay, it's on CN partition, CN configuration, DC local. So now our setting is correct. The feature is enabled successfully and in the right location, or on the right location. The recycle bin is enabled on the right location. So now this is done successfully. We will go to the next section in the PDF of HUCA, which is called Active Directory Security Assessment. So now we have enabled already the feature. There is some recommendation in HUCA that you should specify certain users or certain groups to be able to restore any deleted items from the Active Directory recycle bin. But for me, I don't normally, the one that will be responsible for this is the IT group, and no one have access to the Active Directory console or Active Directory service except of the IT group, and no one have anything to do, or no one have any rights to do anything on the Active Directory console or Active Directory service except of the TR_IT or the IT group. So I don't need to enable or to delegate or to give some users the permission to return Active Directory deleted objects from the Active Directory recycle bin. So now here there is another section in the PDF, but let me first remember here is also another recommendation from HUCA, that to make sure that certain built-in Active Directory groups should not contain any users. One of these built-in Active Directory groups are account operators. It should not contain any users. Okay, this is number one. And there is also the backup operators should not contain any users. Okay, and the server operators should not also contain any user. Also, for more info, please refer to the document. Just read it and see why these groups should not contain any users. I'm just implementing the recommendations. You can read more in the document to know why he is saying that this Active Directory built-in groups should not contain any users. Okay, but as a best practice, as you see here, my Active Directory domain structure doesn't contain any users in this built-in Active Directory groups. Okay, he is saying, he is discussing everything why you should, for example, don't have users in the backup operators built-in Active Directory group, and also why should you don't have also any users in the printer operators Active Directory built-in groups. All of this HUCA is saying it in his PDF in details. Okay, so I am just implementing the PDF to show you all how this can be done in a production environment, or how this to be done practically. As for the theoretical, or as for the things explaining it, you can refer to the document and read it more, and I encourage you all to do this. Okay, so here, for example, there is something called SID filtering. Actually, I don't have this this kind of setting in my lab. I don't need it in my lab, but maybe you all, example, in a situation that you need this kind of option to be implemented, or this security practice to be implemented. I'm just seeing what kind of these practices or these security practices needed by my lab environment. Okay, so now we have already, as I said before, the first practice is to enable the Active Directory recycle bin. We have done this, and then the second best practice is to make sure that certain built-in Active Directory groups should not contain any users. For example, one of these Active Directory built-in groups are account operators, backup operators, printer operators. These groups, HUK says that they contain or they have an excessive rights. Okay, so you need to make sure that when assigning any user to this group, you need to make sure that this user will not misuse his misuse or use this excessive rights to do anything wrong with your domain. Okay, and as I said, it's a best practice to not to put any users in these groups. Okay, you can, for example, create a group, okay, and give it rights by yourself, because this built-in Active Directory groups contains excessive contains excessive rights that is not needed. For example, for the printer operators, it contains excessive rights that is not needed by any printer operator. Okay, this is what the documentation of HUK say. Okay, so if you need to give a specific user specific rights, then you create a group and then assign the security rights that you need, or the rights that you need for this specific group. Okay, for example, here also is saying that there is a group called protected users. Okay, you should put your, as a best recommendation from HUK, to put your IT personnel in this group, which is called protected users. Okay, this is this group, it is in users. Okay, it's called protected users. Okay, members of this group. Okay, additional protection, he said that this group or this users or the users in this group will have additional protection to their Active Directory user accounts. So who is more important than the IT personnel? Users, okay, to be protected. So he's saying that your admins should be in this group, especially if your admins handle domain controllers and a lot of things. Okay, so I will put my tr_IT, which is my IT group or Active Directory IT group. I will add it to this protected users Active Directory built-in group. Okay, so now I will go to members and then add, and then I will add tr_IT. This is the group that contains all of my IT personnel. I said before, this documentation will be in the transformers folder. This is a folder that I will upload it to my Google Drive account. It will be a Google Drive link. It will be under the description or the description section under the video, okay, that I will upload on my YouTube channel. Okay, so here we can say, for example, this is another recommendation by Hugh, that your admin accounts or the IT personnel Active Directory account, it should have the option account is sensitive and cannot be delegated checked on their Active Directory user properties. For example, I have my domain admin account, it's called, or my Active Directory user account is Kera_off. I need to check that my account is sensitive and cannot be delegated. Okay, so for example, if you need to delegate some rights to some users, then you have a user, okay, and then give him the rights that you need, but you not delegate your Active Directory, or you delegate some of your rights to another user. You can make a user and give it the rights that you need. Okay, so now here we will go to my account, and then it is another best practice is to give, or if you are an admin account in your Active Directory domain, you need to check the option that your account is sensitive, okay, and you cannot be delegated. Okay, this is another best practice HUK said in his documentation. Okay, also I encourage you all to read the documentation, because he is explaining everything in details. My only goal here in this video to show you all how this is implemented in a practical way. If there is anything needed, I will tell Yuka that he maybe needs to edit some things, or maybe he need to add something. We will see if this documentation needs any further additional maybe additional notes or additional steps needed, but until now I didn't see anything that we need to add, because this documentation seems to be very perfect, or it's well written. Okay, so here now this is another documentation that says, or another best practice says, that the DNS admin, there is an Active Directory user group, Active Directory built-in user group that is called DNS admins group. Okay, he say that DNS management does not require full admin rights. Users often need to create some DNS records because it's really delegating a group with read permission. Okay, he's saying that you should make sure that the Active Directory built-in group that is named DNS admins group, which this group is responsible for managing DNS, you need to make sure that this Active Directory built-in group doesn't contain any users except of the IT. For me, here is the best practice for me, is that this Active Directory group should only contain the IT personnel. You don't need to give anyone or any group in the Active Directory domain any rights on the DNS. Okay, here is some special situations. Maybe you need to give some Active Directory groups some rights to the DNS, so you need to be careful. He's saying here that you need to make it with certain permissions. You need them to give them only read or something, but as for me, as a best practice, you should not give any Active Directory user group or security group any rights to the DNS except for the IT group. Okay, this is done in my production environment. Okay, so he's just making sure. I will just check with you all now to see if this group contains any Active Directory user groups except of the IT. Here we will go, and here we can see, we will go right click and properties. Okay, and then we go to security, and then go to advanced. Here we can see that there is no groups, but here just a minute. Here is saying that you should not give any other Active Directory security group any rights to the DNS server. Okay, only the one responsible for making any changes to the DNS is the group which is called DNS domain DNS admins. Okay, you should not give any Active Directory security group anything on the DNS, any rights on the DNS. So here we can see that I don't have any group, I didn't give any rights to any Active Directory security group on my DNS server, and also the DNS admins Active Directory built-in group. It doesn't contain any user except for the IT personnel only. So now this is another best practice. So we have discussed the Active Directory recycle bin, and then some security practice to make sure that some Active Directory built-in groups doesn't contain any users, and then some precaution on the DNS. You need to make sure that there is no Active Directory security group except of the IT personnel and the DNS admin, and also DNS admin should not contain any users except for the IT personnel. Okay, in general, you don't give any group or users any rights on the DNS except for the IT personnel. Here is another recommendation from HUCA, for example, that if you are working with service accounts, you need to make sure that this account have a minimum password length of 20. Okay, for example, here we'll discuss it a little bit further. Here, for example, as I said before, when we have started or we have started the installation of the BackupExec 20.6, this software needs a user or Active Directory user account that have full rights to the domain, the Active Directory domain. Why? So as I said before, that he can run the BackupExec services efficiently, and he can access any server or have rights to access any server to take the backup that he needs. For example, if you need to backup a remote server, for example, the first domain controller, you need to have or to give the BackupExec 20.6 software a user that have full rights to the domain controller or the first domain controller or any workstation or server in the domain. Okay, so this account is named a service account, okay, because it is needed only to run the BackupExec software and to take a backup. So it's named, or it is typically named as a service account. So if you have, for example, also when I have started installing the pfSense firewall, also I need a service account, or I needed an Active Directory user account that will be able to integrate the Active Directory with the pfSense. As I said before, if you need to access the pfSense system with your Active Directory user account, so you need to have an integration between the pfSense firewall and the Active Directory. So who is responsible for doing this? You have to create an Active Directory user account to link both Active Directory structure and the pfSense firewall, and this is also, this user account will be a pfSense service account. I have about 2 or 3 service accounts. For example, you have a SQL, also you can name it as a service account. So he is saying that you should, if you have this type of accounts, you need to make sure that it have a password typically of 20, okay, because this is very critical. This is Active Directory user accounts that manage very critical things in your domain. For example, the BackupExec service account, this is manage the backups. The pfSense manage the integration between the firewall and the Active Directory. And if you have SQL, also this service account is very important to run the SQL jobs and everything. So you need to make sure that no hacker can know this password, so it should be a very lengthy password. And also, as I said before, you need to make sure that all of these service accounts have the option of password never expire, because if one of these service or one of these Active Directory service accounts password expire, then it will lock the account, okay, and then your for example, your BackupExec will not work, your pfSense firewall integration will not work. So you need to make sure that there is password never expire option to be checked when creating this Active Directory service account, and then to make sure that the password is lengthy, it's more than 20 or to be at least 20 characters, okay. So how can we do here? How we can do this? This will be done through tweaking or making some changes in the Active Directory schema. Not the Active Directory schema. We will make a new password policy in the Active Directory and link it to a group called Service Accounts, an Active Directory security group, which we will name it Service Accounts, and we will put all of our Active Directory service accounts in it, and then link this group to the new password policy. We will see this, how this is done. This is also done by HUCA. This will be implemented only, this password policy will be only implemented to the service accounts, okay. We will see how we can do this. First, we need to create an Active Directory security group and name it Service Accounts, and put all of our Active Directory service account users in it, and then we will go to the Active Directory Administrative Center and create a new password policy for the Active Directory, and then link this password policy to this group. So only this group will have a password policy for 20 characters, okay. For example, any other Active Directory user, will have another or have a different password policy. For example, the default password policy will be 7 characters, but only for the service accounts it will be 20, and we will specify it only to be applied to the service accounts. We will see how this will be done. Actually, sorry, I am talking too much, but we will see how this is done. One can say for me, so okay, I can make a password, okay, but you will not be able to set it for 20 because the default password policy it's only to have 7 characters, okay. It can be 7 characters or more, for example, okay. But for example, if you forget to make it 20, for example, or you make it less, or make it less than 20 characters, okay, so it will be accepted because the default password policy it's only to be 7 or more, okay. But by making a policy that you should have 20, if you put a password less than 20 it will not accept it. So this will be more restrictive and will be more effective and more efficient, so you will not forget. You need to make sure that all of service accounts will be its password more than 20. So for example, if you forget, he will give you an error saying that password will not meet the password policy requirements, okay. So you can just hold for a second. So let's continue on up. Now we will make a password policy only for the service Active Directory service accounts, and make the password length to be a minimum of 20, okay. So we'll see how this will be done. Here is the error message that will appear if you are trying to make a password for any service account to be less than 20. It will give you an error saying that this is not allowed. So how to make a password policy in the Active Directory different than the default password policy? I said before, the default password policy will be 7 characters, or the password policy that the length of the password policy, the length of the password, the default password policy, the Active Directory user password length should be more than 7, okay, 7 characters. So now we will open the Active Directory Administrative Center and begin creating a new password policy, a new Active Directory password policy, and link it or make it applied to the service accounts only. Here I have 3 service accounts: Backup service account, and pfSense service accounts, and Active Directory Right Management service account, okay. So here I'll make a new group and name it tr_service accounts. After that, you should move all of the 3 accounts that I have mentioned before: the BackupExec service account, the pfSense service account, and the Active Directory Right Management service to this group, okay. Because this group we will link the new Active Directory password policy to it, to be applied to this group. So now you'll open Active Directory Administrative Center. And then we will click on Transformers Local. We will get the sub menu, or click on it, and then we will go to the system, and then password setting container. Okay, here again, here is system, and then password setting container, and click on it, okay. double click on it, and then right click in this blank space. We'll make right click and then new password policy, new password setting, and we will name it. Here we will do this setting. We will name it password security for maybe service accounts, and then precedence will give it 20. I don't know what is mean by 20, but you will do it as he said. I don't know what means by precedence. Or maybe precedence means that the order of execution. For example, 20 means maybe it is the last password to be done. Maybe enable password length to be minimum of 25. Okay, and then enforce minimum password age to be 1. We said this before, and maximum password age to be 42. The minimum for the default password setting is 90 days. This is the expire date, and minimum password age, I said this in the beginning, it will be 1 day. So this is the time that you need before changing your password. If you, for example, set a password and then you choose to do or to reset it or to change it to another one, you should wait for 1 day. Okay, so here we can see that precedence, minimum password length 25, 24, all of the setting here. You will link it to the group of the TR service account, the group that we have done from a couple of seconds. So let's continue our lab. Here we will link it to the Active Directory group, which is the TR_ service accounts, which is the group that we have created, and put all of our Active Directory service accounts in it, and then OK. So this is one recommendation from Hugh, and then he has another recommendation that the password for the Active Directory user accounts for the IT personnel should be different, or the password length for the Active Directory user accounts, the password length for the Active Directory IT user accounts should be a minimum password length from 14 to 16 characters. Okay, so here we will make another password for the IT personnel. He means here that the IT Active Directory user accounts password should be different than the normal Active Directory user accounts. As we said before, the normal Active Directory user accounts should be password length 7 characters, but because of the IT personnel have more rights and more delegations, or have more power, so their password should be complex and more in length. Okay, so here he's saying that we need to make it from 14 to 16 characters. Here I have already a group called TR_IT. This is all my IT personnel in it, but I will make a new group and name it TR_IT group number 2. And then here we can put any IT personnel that we need. Sorry, and then we will apply this password setting to this group. I think precedence, maybe, sorry, precedence mean he's saying that it's from 20 to for example it begins from 20 characters to maximum 25, and I think also precedent smear for the IT that it is from 14 characters to 16 characters. We'll see that now that we name it as the settings say IT password, and then we will give it. And also, as he is saying that as a best practice also to have a maximum password age, as we said, the maximum password age in the default user accounts to be 90 days or expired date to be 90 days, but as for the IT it should be less in time, it should be 42 days, maybe not 90 days, and the minimum password age it is 1. We will leave it as it is. He is saying here enforce minimum password, user cannot change the password within days, user must change the password after. So we will make that the IT should change their password after 42 days, and he cannot change his password unless 1 day. You have to have 1 day, okay? So here we can say that precedence it's 14. Now we have done this for the IT and for the service account. He is saying that the default password parser should be from 7 to 8 characters. This is already applied in our network, and we have minimum or maximum password age to be of 90 days. As I said before, I'm here, I am discovering the documentation, I am seeing or I am applying the best practice or the security best practices that fit with my lab requirements or with my lab scenario. But actually I will try to take the most of this documentation, but everyone can implement what is suitable for his environment. He's saying also here is another recommendation that if you have a service account, then you should make sure that this option is not checked. Do not require Kerbis pre-authentication. I try to see if I have any, or to see if my service accounts have this option enabled on it by using this command prompt, sorry, this PowerShell command, but actually I didn't succeed and it wasn't correct for some reason. But I will, in my upcoming video, I'll try to implement it back again, I mean. Here I will go to my first domain controller and try to apply this PowerShell command. Here right click and apply this command. Don't have anything. I think yes, it is implemented successfully, but I don't have this option enabled on any of my service accounts. So now I am already in compliance with this point from HEO PDF or documentation. Here also is saying that delegation, this is something related to the servers. Okay, here I think this, when I try to implement this point in his documentation, I think the command wasn't correct. I think I don't understand this point, but I think I will maybe read more in the next video. But you can read the documentation and see he's explaining everything in details. Here there is a problem with the command PowerShell, so we will pause this point on, for now, and then I will try to read more about it and to ask maybe Hiyuka about it. I think it's pronounced H-U-I, Hoi, maybe Hoi, Hoika, maybe. I am pronouncing it now, Hiyo. It's Hoi, yes. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. Servers with unconstrained delegation. Okay. Ensure that admin holder is in a clean state. He's saying here that there is an active directory container or something, an option in the Active Directory that's called admin SD holder. It is a container inside Active Directory, something in the Active Directory configuration. He's saying that you need to make sure that you don't have any group except of the IT to have full control on this container, or to have access to this configuration. Okay, admin SD holder, this is like a configuration, or like a folder, or something like an option. You need only to make sure that the IT is the only persons that have full control on it, or the one that is responsible for using it, okay, or making any changes to it. Okay, so here now we will go to this container. You need to make sure that advanced features is enabled in the view. So here in the system we can see that there is something called ADS holder. Okay, from the properties we need to make sure that this container or this object in the Active Directory, no one except of the IT personnel to have full control on it. We can see that authenticated users have only read on it. You need to make sure that they have only read. Okay, users of the Active Directory to have read. You should not have any other security group to have access to this container, and the only allowed user, it's the authenticated users to have only read. You should not have any other Active Directory security group to be there. For example, he's saying here that there is another group that have full control. You should not give it full control. Okay, there is another thing that is something called fake service account. This is done to test if there is any hackers trying to access your domain. This is like a fake, or say it is like a fake account, or something like a trap. You do it like a user to be, it's called the honey account. This is to make sure, or there is no one is hacking your system. For example, this is a trap for the hacker. Okay, so if the hacker uses this account, you you know that there is something in your network. You need to revise the logs, as you say. You need to revise the logs for this account. This is a fake account. He's saying it's used for testing the security of your network and to make sure that it's not hackable. Okay, you can read more about this, but actually I didn't implement it, but I think I will implement it in the next video. I think this is more related to security members or security personnel, IT security personnel, but I am just implementing this documentation because it seems some of them are very good best practice policies, and some of them I know actually because of working in my production environment, and some actually it's new to me, but it's logic, okay, that you should use it or implement it. Okay, let's see if how much is remaining from the video. Oh, there is about 10 minutes. He says a great way to catch an attacker is to create a fake service account that contains a service principal name. This is like a trap, as I said before, to know if there is a hacker or attacker is trying to access your Active Directory. But I didn't use it. Maybe I will do it in my next video. And he is saying that you need to check the log for this user to know if there is an attacker is trying to compromise your network. Okay. Monitor high privileged groups. He is saying that you need to keep an eye on users that have full privileges or having high privileges. For example, the domain admins group is a group that have full or have excessive rights to the Active Directory and can do typically everything in the domain. So you need to make sure or to check regularly which users are added to this highly Active Directory group, Active Directory built-in group. For example, here is something that you check in the event log. This is the event log number 4728. This is the event ID that it will be recorded in the event log, saying that a new user is added to this group. For example, here if you check the Windows logs in the security, you will see this event log. You need to make sure, because actually maybe some attacker added himself to this group, so you need to make sure that this doesn't happen. And actually, to be a regular task as an IT, you need to check specific event IDs to make sure that your network is secured. Okay, for example, the failed logins, the successful logins, the added of groups to highly privileged groups, like for example adding a user to the domain admins group. Here for example I will show you that this event 4728, for example, you will see that I have added, when I have added my username or Active Directory user account to this group, so I have full rights to the domain controller. You will see that it is logged here, and he's saying that the user which is named Kairaof is added to this group. So also here Huika is making some recommendation, or is giving us some recommendation to check specific event IDs to make sure that our Active Directory is secured and it's not compromised or hacked. He will give us in a couple of seconds the number or the event ID numbers that we need to check regularly. As I said before, it's one of the main important tasks of an IT is to regularly, every month or as you wish, to check the security event logs, okay, for every server or for the domain, Active Directory domain as a whole. So here I'm trying to get the event ID 4728. Sorry, it's taking a little bit of time, but because I'm trying to get this event ID. Here we can see now that I am here is saying that the user named K Raouf is added to the group of domain admins. So you need to check this event ID every month or every couple of times to see which user is added to which, because if there is an attacker that compromised your network, you will see that he is adding himself to this group. Okay, here is a couple of event IDs you need to check or to regularly check, and every one of them the event ID and the description of this ID. So we need to check or to monitor these event IDs regularly. So here, for example, we will not let me have a small thing. Here all of the event logs, there is a lot of event logs, okay, and you will not search every time for this. Okay, so we'll make something called a new custom view. Here we will make another folder and name it custom view and put all of the IDs that he recommended. So we will open it directly. We don't need to search every time the whole security log. No, we will make a custom view that contains only the ID numbers or the event ID numbers that he set to us, so we can go directly and search it. We don't need to, for example, search it one by one or search it from the beginning to the end, because this is not a practical way to search the event log. Okay, we will, for example, if they are not in order, for example, maybe the first order is 1100 and for example then you need to go, for example, to 2000, so you need to roll or scroll until you get to the event ID that you need. So to make it simpler, we will make a custom view and then we will put only in this view the event IDs that we need to check or to monitor. Okay, so we'll see how this is done. We'll make create a custom view and then we will tell him to this is anytime. I mean, you need to have the event log or the time or the duration or when this event has happened anytime, and then we will tell him get everything critical, warning or error or information. This is the type of events. Okay, it's critical event or warning or it's an error. And then we tell him to we will check some or sorry, we'll tell him to check specific event IDs. Okay, so we need to tell it by log. Okay, sorry, tell him by log, and then we will so this is maybe the point that we didn't he is telling us the event IDs. This is actually a very good step, but I can add something to this document or to add a small tip just to make it easier for us to search the events without having to scroll down all of the security event log. Okay, so if, for example, he will tell him that this custom view will contain the following event IDs. if you have to put multiple IDs, okay, and they are not in sequence, okay. For example, here we can see that it's 1100 and the next will be 1101, so it's not in sequence. If you put events IDs which is not in sequence, you need to put a comma after every event ID. So here we can see that. So here we can see that we're adding that. Here we can see that he is describing every event and what is this event is concerning, or what does it says. For example, there is one called a user right was assigned. For example, if an IT, for example, added some rights to a user, for example, to open a certain share, or open or to have a certain right, for example, maybe to be to have example rights to the DNS, to have rights to the domain controller, okay. This when a user right is added or removed, okay. So every event ID is described. So this is an easy way for us to check the events in only from one window, okay, or from one view. So you don't have to scroll all of the security log, especially if they are not in sequence or not in numerical sequence. Sorry. So here a point he said Hugh in his documentation saying that there is some Active Directory built in groups that contains excessive rights. For example, there is account operators and backup operators and printer operators. This Active Directory built in groups have excessive rights. So if you put any Active Directory user account in these groups, he will have more than the rights he needs. For example, if you put it in printer operators, he will not only print, he will have excessive rights to other services that he should not be able to access. So his recommendation that certain Active Directory Active Directory built-in groups should not contain any members. If you need to have a specific user to have a specific right, then you need to create a group, Active Directory security group, and then give this specific right to this group, because some Active Directory built-in groups have excessive rights. This is his recommendation, or this is what he says in his documentation. So now we are completing our event ID custom view. All of this is very very useful. Event IDs, it is just giving us a full view of what is running on our network. This event IDs, if you revise it, so you can have a complete let's say a complete simulation, or a complete idea of what is running on your network, who is getting rights, what computers are out of the network, what rights are added or removed, what members are changed from security groups to another security groups. Okay, we will name this view event logs to monitor. So this is a tip, okay, just to add it to this. If you can hear me, if it's my simple or my humble addition to this perfect PDF or perfect documentation. Okay, so here we name it event log. Daily, you can monitor it on a daily task or maybe whatsoever. So now we can see that now we have a simple view that contains all of our IDs that we need to revise. We don't need to go to the Windows log and then security and then begin scrolling all of the event logs, especially they are not in order or not in numerical sequence, or not in numerical sequence. Some of them are for example 1, then 4, then 7, they are not in numerical sequence. Okay, so now we can see that also this is another documentation for here. I will build a complete lab on it, okay, because this is another very important documentation, how to design your Active Directory infrastructure, or how to design your Active Directory hierarchy, or how, let's say, how you can design the OUs and the structure of the Active Directory in a very good way and a very effective way. Okay, so this will have, I will have a complete lab on it. I will not give it one video, or maybe I give it a couple of videos, or maybe a whole lab on it. Okay, so as for now, I'm just working with this document that he has made. It's perfect one, I have to say, because I see that some recommendations I didn't find it in my production, okay, environment. Some of them are very useful. So now, until this is the end of my second part for the Active Directory security assessment documentation, and we will have another part, the third part. We will complete working with this documentation, and until I see you all for the next video, hope this was informative for you, and would like you to thank you for viewing. If you like the video, please subscribe and share. If you have any comment, please leave a comment in the comment section. If you like, as I said before, subscribe and like and share. Okay, and you have, as I said before, if you have any notes, please leave it in the comment section. I will be gladly to read it and to implement your suggestions or comments. Okay, thank you so much. Here I am just shutting down the servers. So until I see you all, thank you so much. Goodbye.